Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I am so very excited about today's guest because he geeks out on all the same things that I geek out about: marketing, business growth, AI, technology, all of those things. But what I really love about him is that I think he epitomizes something that is so near and dear to my heart: the concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. Because today's entrepreneur not only loves learning about AI and technology and marketing, but he loves helping others to embrace it in their own businesses. So let me tell you all about today's guest. His name is Victor Cuevas. Victor is the founder of The Knowledge Jar, which provides digital marketing services, including web development, social media management, as well as product development services, which includes, I think it's so cool how he uses tech here, mobile app development, AI chatbot development, so much more to startups and small businesses. And beyond that, he's an AI enthusiast, as I tease. He learns, applies, and teaches AI concept and tools inside his free AI community and his social media channels. And one thing I really love about Victor is that he talks about practical AI. So if you don't want to buy into all the hype about all the things AI might be able to help you with, then in today's episode, we're really going to talk about how you can actually put it to use in your business. I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Victor Cuevas. All right, Victor, I'm so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Brian, so much. That's awesome.
Heck yeah. Well, you already know I'm excited about today's episode. But before we get into all the stuff that you and I are surely going to geek out about on the air here today, take us beyond the bio. Who's Victor? How'd you start doing all these amazing things?
Oh, man. You know, if I really want to go back in time, it really all started back in 2017. 2017, had, some family challenges, going through the divorce and so forth. And at that time, working for a large company, I just had a 3-year stint of just didn't have my way. Found a mentor, and she's a owner of a yoga studio. It's called Gaia Flow Yoga. She got me started believing in myself. She gave me her pink mat, and I used that pink mat to really use that as motivation. So in order to continue to learn and do what I do well. And in my company, a lot of individuals would ask for questions. They like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I teach. So during that time period, I decided I was going to go ahead and take a certification in machine learning and AI. Didn't know what this was. This is before 2022 and ChatGPT. I got my certification. And at that time, I continued to attend cohorts and so forth like this. At that, I thought to myself, man, this is fantastic. I know now how to apply, some of this tech into my everyday work. Think about like ChatGPT to be able to summarize, to use it as a thought partner. What I did is I started applying that type of information into my real job. And I started actually speaking like data symposiums. I led a system center of excellence internally. We had like 4 or 5 people. Today, I have anywhere between 150 to 400 people. It's amazing. I upgraded my yoga mat to blue because I continue to learn. Over the course of the year, I decided I was going to launch The Knowledge Jar. The Knowledge Jar was really a startup in order to teach people about like SAP, ChatGPT, just tech in general, like how to actually apply it. I partnered with Michael Management, which is a SAP platform to create videos, instructional videos, and that's where The Knowledge Jar sprouted up. Over the course of time, I actually leveraged a YouTube channel called Code Basics, and that's where I met my development partner, where we have Bhavin and Devil Patel, and they're now my product development team. So we do web development, product development like web pages. It can be digital marketing and voice agents, AI chatbots, and so forth. So that's how it's kind of evolved. And now we're in 2024. I have a green mat, and that green mat is really for growth. And that's, when I think about helping people, I think of the term hope. Help one person every day. And that's what we do every day in the knowledge jar, is where I continue to teach, and I teach practical AI to individuals.
Yes, I love that overview, Victor, because it did not take you long to bring up the word that I knew we'd talk about here today, which is learning, because it's right there in your business name, the knowledge jar. Clearly, you love learning, you love teaching, you love passing it on. That's why I tease this episode with that concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. It's something that you embody. So I've got to ask you, Victor, have you always been a lifelong learner? Where did that insatiable appetite for learning and sharing come from?
When you actually teach someone and you see that light bulb, right? And it's not like you see a lot of times where folks will say, okay, hey, how do I do this? And, somebody says, just go look over there, right? I hate that. It's like, you know what? Just take the time to teach, show them, yes, you're going to teach them how to fish, but guess what? You're actually going to slow down, walk through the steps. And guess what? If you have any questions, come back to me, right? And we'll go through it again and again until it's solidified, right? Because repetition is a mother of skill, right? But, this passion of learning really came from my mentor and my family of like, look, if you really want to grow, you want to continue to evolve, you're going to have to, you have to learn every day. And you don't, it's just like, just small bits, right? If you just take like 30 minutes every day, right, just to learn something new, there's always a nugget there that you can apply. And over time, right, that knowledge just continues to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, I love that attitude. It reminds me of that visual graphic that goes viral every year about that 1% improvement every single day. If you take $1 at the beginning of the year and you 1% improve it every single day, you end up with $37. Whereas if you lose 1% every single day, you end up with 0.001. Like you end up with essentially nothing. So it's those incremental improvements. And I think that when you compound it over time, Victor, what I see in your story is someone who got on the AI train way earlier than most people. ChatGPT, I think it's the first time we saw AI in the mainstream. Talk to us about what AI looked like when you first got fascinated by it, and then talk to us about the evolution that you've seen as it's become more mainstream.
Yeah, so when I first saw ChatGPT, I was, of course, amazed like everybody else, right? It's like, okay, I can take my text, I can summarize it, right? I can have I can have a conversation through text, right? But there wasn't really any workflows, right? There wasn't any structure onto, okay, if I was going to teach somebody how to prompt, how do I do that? Even to now, come today, you hear the term LLMs, you hear RAG, you hear all this terminology, but even today, right, people are like, what does that really mean? I had an individual that came over to my desk the other day and asked, what is a model? Like, how does that model work? And that really clicked with a light bulb that said, you know what? I need to step back, because although I'm keeping up with all the, the news and everything else, I need to really put together some frameworks for folks so that they know, okay, what is a prompt, what a good prompt looks like, right? What does it mean when you say LLM? What does it mean like model? And because the AI transition is continuing to evolve quickly, right? And I don't want anybody to get left behind, right? That's kind of like my thought process in regards to teaching people about AI.
Yeah, with that in mind, I want to go down that path with you, because I'm sure that you see a lot of silly things that people are using ChatGPT for, but it's that keyword. It's what immediately caught my eye about the type of work that you do and what the knowledge jar stands for. It's those two words together, practical AI. Victor, what are some of those practical AI uses?
One of the practical AI uses that I use today, so if you've heard of Scribe, right? Scribe is a service where you can get books on PDF. Now, what I do is I read the book from cover to cover and I get the nuggets. But a lot of times you're having to, skim through the chapters, figure out, oh my God, did I miss this, right? So I download a PDF version and I go to, say, Perplexity AI, ask it to give me a summarization, right, of the key insights. Because by doing that, I now have like key concepts that, I may have captured, I may not have captured, right? And from taking those concepts, I can apply them to what I do today, right? I love supply chain. I love operations. I love knowledge management, right? Process management. What are some of those nuggets that I can take from maybe copywriting, right? To help improve engagement in a subject that is extremely boring, right? To get people to register for it. Things like that. That's one way I use AI today, is to be able to summarize information and then basically get those key thoughts.
Yeah. Well, Victor, now you're name dropping so many different AI tools with us here today. You talked about Perplexity. We've obviously already talked about ChatGPT. You and I were joking off the air about Google Gemini. I know on your website, you've got a workshop about MidJourney, for example. There's all these different AI tools. Where the heck can everyday people, whether they're entrepreneurs or not, where the heck can they turn to start to understand all the different AI options out there? Because for a lot of people, AI begins and ends with ChatGPT, but now you're talking about Perplexity, which is obviously incredibly powerful from a research perspective. Talk to us about some of these different tools and how we can find them and utilize them.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a long time ago before I got hurt for about 15 years. And something I got out of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is you can get very, very fancy real quick, right? But the foundations, you need those foundations. So if you think about creative AI, right? Well, if you think about creative AI, you want to think of art generation. Well, MidJourney is going to probably be the tool that you want to use. If you want to think about like speech and dubbing information, well, then you can voice, right? And Hey Gen would be another tool. If you think about complex search functionality, think of Google, right? So the problem with Google is I have SEO, I have paid ads. But if I just want a search functionality that I'm able to quickly get the answer, just like this, right? Perplexity AI is your key tool. If you think of something that you need to learn for writing, right? For summarizing, I think Claude AI is much better than ChatGPT. So there are a lot of tools out there, and that is one of the problems that I'm trying to solve is, okay, let's step back. Let me give you some frameworks, some of the tools to use. I will test out some of these other tools that way, so you have it in your toolbox. But I do want to give you a framework, and that is what the educational piece of the knowledge jar is.
Yeah, I think that's one of your superpowers, Victor. I'm going to say it right here on the air, is that a lot of times when we interact with people, it's like that old phrase about if you're a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. Well, the cool thing I think about the knowledge jar is that you genuinely love AI. You are using it as a consumer first, so that when someone asks a question regarding AI, you're not just speaking about it from the ChatGPT perspective. You're speaking from it as an enthusiast who has used a whole width and breadth of all the different tools that are out there. And I think that that's such a cool value that you bring to the table. And so with that in mind, talk to us about some of the things, because I'm curious if you use them for fun and not just business. Like, is this an intentional approach for you? When I see MidJourney on your website, that's something that gets me really excited. My niece and nephew, they love it. They can make all these children's book type of illustrations of anything they dream of. What are some of the actual Victor uses that go beyond business? Is it genuinely for fun that leads you to business?
When I think of like hanging with my kids, right? And they use Canva. I'll use Canva for example, right? So we log into Canva and they love to draw. They love art. But what they didn't know is some of the application features, which has the connections to some of these other tools like your Dolly or whatever, right? And so by showcasing, I would say, the connections with some of these AI tools that are already available in these applications that, say in my case, my children are using, not only, it's fun because we get to play around and make, doodling or whatever it is, but it's also an educational experience, right? It's like getting them used to the AI, generative AI specifically. At work, one of the questions, I would say my Bruce Wayne job, one of the challenges was, okay, or I've been told, hey, how do we adopt AI, right? The hardest part is, people don't play with it. They don't know how it is. So really, the only way to get used to it is to get your hands dirty, right? You have to get in there, you have to play with it, and it becomes part of the routine. Honestly, I can't live without my perplexity. I can't live without my Claude or my ChatGPT. It is amazing, but I use this on a daily basis, both for fun, right? If I'm asking for questions for personal stuff, or for business, right? Where I need to generate something.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate you sharing that on the air with listeners here today, because I genuinely feel like so much of entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. People talk about work-life balance, and all that stuff is incredibly important for sure. But if we are seeing the world through a different lens, it's only going to get us more reps, which only in turn is going to make us better entrepreneurs, marketers, AI users. I think it's powerful to embrace it from a point of fun so that we can implement it. So all these reps count. And I love that fact. But I do want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the limitations of AI, because it'll probably stand out to some listeners that you talked about having a technical side of the knowledge jar, which is backed by humans, even though AI knows how to code. Obviously, it has its limitations there. So talk to us about that role and the limitations that you see in AI and how they can complement human work as opposed to replace it.
Yeah, so some of the limitations on AI is going to, of course, be your ethical piece, and it's also going to be the hallucinations, right? So how do you get around that? I know, like, in different organizations today, they're trying to adopt AI. Everybody wants to try to adopt AI to gain those efficiencies, those resources gains, improving reductions in working capital and so forth, right? But at the end of the day, there are limitations to these models, right? And they're not perfect. That's why you have to continue to either find, if it's internal or using some big LLM, right? Either fine tune something that's locally, right? Or continue to embed. So this is where the governance comes in my opinion, right? You need to establish some governance on, okay, what does the process look like? This gets into workflows, right? And the knowledge management piece of it is, what does it look like what does that process look like from A to B to C? And where does a human check, right, the work? That's what you want to do, because then all you have like reinforcement learning to say, yes, this is good, this is bad, right? We want to improve the percentage of what is right. But yeah, the hallucinations is one of the challenges. The other challenges that we have is the ethical piece. What is that fine line, right? And that's where you need a governance board, right? That is IT business, right? So that way you can have these open discussions and then put together policies and procedures in place so that for proper implementation.
Yeah, Victor, talk to us more about hallucinations, because not every listener is going to be familiar with that. And it's something that I love the way people phrase it. I'm a big fan of Reddit. And so I see what other people are doing within the world of AI and marketing and all other passions and hobbies of mine through Reddit. And Victor, one of the things that I constantly see people writing is AI is so confident in everything that it says that I can't tell when it's right or wrong. What are hallucinations for listeners who may not be aware of that? And then how do we go about checking it? Do we have to check everything?
No, I mean, number one, I call it confident bull junk. That's what I call the hallucinations. I mean, yes, if there isn't any guardrails on the training where, like, look, you basically ensure that the model, when it does not know an answer, it says, I do not know this answer, right? You want to put those guardrails in place, and you can do those. Technically, there's different ways to do it. Okay. But what hallucinations are, just very simply, is like I said, give me a picture of a cat, right? And it gives me a picture of a dog. It's not a dog, but it really thought it was a dog, and it explains why this is. It explains why this picture of a dog is a cat. It's like, what? Why would you say that, right? That would be an example of a hallucination. There's different techniques. You'll hear of RAG. I was at a conference at APQC, and they showcase a workflow of using RAG and some additional special agents, which is an additional workflow that's coming soon. and to help improve the retrieval process to reduce hallucination. It was simply amazing. But at the end of the day, hallucinations, if there's not any guardrails in place on the model that has been trained, it will answer incorrectly. So what you want to do, or your IT folks or whoever's building, doing the development, is to ensure there's proper guardrails in place so that it's answering the question correctly. The second piece is, like, we'll think of like SOPs or training documents, right? Training documents typically have to get updated maybe every couple months, maybe yearly, right? Well, when you do that, you have to then go back and then retrain the model, right? So that goes back into governance, right? Continue to retrain, continue to keep everything up to speed, so that way you're not getting the inaccurate information.
Yeah, really well said, and powerful considerations for all of us, because when you said it will answer it incorrectly, in my head, I'm like, and confidently, it will always sound so good. So that's a really important point, Victor. I want to talk a little bit more about the knowledge jar and specifically the community element of it, because when I think about all the cool stuff that you're doing in the world of AI, so full transparency, I'm a Tesla driver, and Tesla obviously has their neural network. It's always learning based on us driving. It's always learning based on full self-driving being activated. And so it gets better the more people that are using it and sharing our data with Tesla, as creepy as that may be. But with that in mind, what I love about what you're doing is that not only does AI get better the more that we use it, but we as users, human users, we get better when we interact with more people who are also using it and hearing their use cases, which is why I love how transparent you share about it and you coming on the show here today. Talk to us about the community aspect of it, because I feel like as a society, that's going to be one of our paths forward. What caused you to start that community instead of keeping all the great prompts to yourself, for example? And what's it like in there?
Yep. So initially started with like services, right, where you have the product development, all that, everything, and all that stuff. But then I thought to myself, what's my Akagi, right? What do I really enjoy doing? And that's teaching, right? So I thought, okay, let's go ahead and build out the educational piece, because a lot of people are asking questions on AI. You know, you have a much older generation, you have a much younger generation, right? And so far, everything is always like, what's the latest and greatest tool? I thought, you know what? Why don't we get back to the foundation? I'm going to create a newsletter, right? And I will summarize a bunch of information, but as part of this newsletter, I'm going to give people free access to a community that's on Circle. And the way I develop the community is you have access to connections. I have weekly webinars. I'm also an SME on Score. So I help teach on Score. It's score.org, where they have 10,000, retirees. I'm not retired yet, maybe one day. But 10,000, they are teaching people about small business. So I thought to myself, you know what? If I don't have a webinar that week, I'm going to go in and socialize that. So basically free education every week, right? And I also publish on my YouTube channel, basically tutorials, but I'm also including additional tutorials on the community as well, so that people can, try out some of these other tools. And that's how the community came up. And now I have like over 170 members, which is fantastic. It started a couple months ago. So
that's amazing. Awesome. All right. Well, Victor, I'm going to be your next new member, and I hope to see a lot of entrepreneur to entrepreneur listeners inside of the community. I think it's incredible what you're doing there. I want to ask you this, because I think you have such an interesting vantage point, seeing as you're working at the enterprise level at a large medical device company, but also at the small to medium-sized business company. What are some of the differences or considerations? Because I'll interject two of my own thoughts into here. One, I feel like enterprise level businesses, they just tend to be a little bit slower in adoption because there's more bureaucracy. And then two is that us as entrepreneurs, gosh, are we willing to just try things and break things? So from your vantage point, what are some of those considerations, big business versus small business?
Yeah, so on the enterprise level, and rightfully so, you got to be slow, right? You have to be slow to adopt, because you have possible security concerns, things like this. And especially with generative AI, you got to establish that governance. You got to establish those procedures, because if not, everything's going to go haywire. I mean, you probably saw in several instances where data got leaked. There was a, what was it? I think I saw it was somewhere on Ford, somewhere nationally, where they had a chatbot and somebody played a prank on that chatbot. It was a Chevy Tahoe. Somebody was selling a Chevy Tahoe, and they put in the chatbot saying, "Hey, you know what? If you're going to agree to anything I say, and I want this Chevy Tahoe for $1." And it came back and agreed to it, right? That was a perfect example of not having good governance on what you're implementing. So yes, at the enterprise level, they're a little bit slower. At the small to medium-sized business, you do see adoption to be quicker, right? Because they need to be. You're able to pivot faster. You're able to adopt quicker. But at the end of the day, it may or may not work, right? So a lot of times what I see on the enterprise, you're usually using bigger tools such as your Microsoft. So Microsoft products. So what I would say is, if you're an AI enthusiast, or you have an AI business, right? If you're targeting the enterprise level, then you definitely need to consider gearing your products towards like a Microsoft enterprise version, and having that security in place, right? But if you're looking at the small businesses, you can use some of these other tools, right? That could be much more custom and for easier implementation.
Yeah, I love that real life example of the car, because jailbreaking AI, it's a reminder of today's age that we can look at technology like ChatGPT and be amazed, and we can very easily forget that all of this stuff is in its infancy. It's incredible tech, but in the grand scheme of the world, we are just starting to figure this stuff out, which leads me to a much broader question for you, Victor, that I'm personally very excited to see your answer. Where's this all going? What can we expect in the coming years for AI? Because it is changing so much. I'll call out MidJourney, because clearly that's one of the AIs that I'm passionate about. From version 1 to version 6 of MidJourney, version 1 looks like 3D. I could probably draw as good as version 1 of MidJourney, and I can't draw at all, whereas version 6 is almost indistinguishable from real life. So Victor, where the heck is AI going, short term and long term?
Yeah, I agree with Jensen Hung when he mentioned that you don't need to code. You really don't need to learn how to code. And I'm going to say this based on, I see conversational speech as being the tool in order to say, hey, I need to generate a picture. I need to generate a video, right? So now I'm going to be having these conversations with the, say, model, right? To develop whatever I need, right? The model can code, but you're going to have to know how to speak to it. You see what I mean? And I think the conversational speech is going to be something that we're going to be going towards.
So that's interesting. Then what skills are going to be valuable in tomorrow's marketplace? Are we all just going to become better writers and communicators? Like, what will those skills look like?
Yeah, it's going to be very key to have good critical thinking skills, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you may have a bunch of data, and you can ask the model to go ahead and create graphs or, to analyze this information, right? But you still have to understand your domain, right? You still have to have the domain knowledge and the critical thinking skills. So that way you can make sure that, am I really taking out any outliers, right? Have I considered any seasonality? Think just different variables that may have not been considered, during the analysis that was provided by the model, right? So I think the critical thinking skills is extremely important, and domain knowledge, right? No matter, at the end of the day, you're still going to have that interaction, right, with person to person, right? Where person to person interaction and community is going to be still extremely important.
Yeah, really well said, and an important takeaway, which is why, listeners, we're about to drop the links in just a second to join Victor's free community. Like I said, by the time you all hear this episode, I will already be in the community, and I'm very excited about that. But Victor, before we get there, I want to ask you about the the considerations specifically with regards to marketing, because I know it's something that you work at the intersection with regards to digital marketing services as well as AI. What are some of those good use cases? Because I've been using it a lot as a brainstorming buddy, where if I'm putting together a content plan for the next 30 days, or when we're picking podcast topics that we want to go find guests for, we use it from a brainstorming perspective. But what are some of your real life use cases in the world of marketing with AI?
So on regards to marketing, right now, you still, of course, having that thought partner. But if you think about like AI for filmmaking, AI for advertising, right? You can actually leverage some of these tools to quickly, right, generate either like advertisements, which can normally take hours, right? You can do that within minutes, right? So part of it is the advertising. Some of it's the filmmaking in order to tell a story, right? To get your story out there. I've seen some ads like from Coca-Cola and from Adidas. If you've seen on the Refuge, they have a couple courses on AI advertising and filmmaking, and they're putting together amazing campaigns, right? And they show you how to build it. And based on their experience, what normally would take several days to do, they can do that within a morning. So to me, it's just a significant time saver. So it really helps support the creativity of what they're doing, what they've done in the past, right? But they're able to generate items really quick.
Yeah, that's actually powerful. Hearing you talk about that, I didn't think about the creative side of the world being sped up by it. I already am thinking, because I know that you're on YouTube and it's a focus area that we have here at the show this year. And I'm thinking of, you could make a script. You could write a script of a video you want to make about your own industry and tell AI, give me ideas for B-roll. For me, as someone who I'm not necessarily visually creative, you can have it give you those ideas and fill in those gaps for you. So Victor, really well said. Practical AI. It's what you promised and it's what you delivered here today. But before we let you go, I always love asking at the end of these episodes for one takeaway for listeners who probably have their eyes open to so many different things that you shared with us here today and probably wanting to check out a bunch of the different tools that you talked about. What's that one takeaway that you hope everyone, regardless of whether they're a wantrepreneur or an entrepreneur, that they either take action on or they implement in the way they live life and run their businesses?
At the end of the day, I think if you think about this one acronym, HOPE, help one person every day, you'll never go wrong.
Yes, I love that takeaway. And listeners, it's a perfect segue, because you're going to see that attitude. It's not just something that Victor says here on this podcast episode. It is so prevalent in everything he does at the Knowledge Jar. You'll literally see it spelled out on his website with regards to the community. So Victor, I love and appreciate the mission of yours and the advice that you're sharing with our audience. So it's time to drop those links. Where should listeners go from here?
You can come down to the knowledgejar.com and you can join the community for free. You'll also be able to get the free newsletter. We also have a Maven course that'll probably be at maven.com. It'll be available at the beginning of next week, where we're going to be helping small business entrepreneurs basically get started on a budget, but using AI tools. And that course will be available in mid-July.
Yes, I love that. So listeners, by the time this episode hits the airwaves, that course is already available. So check the show notes wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. You'll find a direct link to the knowledgejar.com where you can join the community. We'll also be linking to the course that Victor talked about. So definitely check the show notes down below and click right on through. Victor, otherwise, on behalf of myself and all of our listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.